Greetings everyone, Woody with Trail Wisdom. It's just after the winter solstice and I'm out on the Black Mountain Trail. Many people worked on this trail 10 years ago with me and this major road to trail conversion, and many hands have been back, I'm sure, to do general maintenance, but I bet very few people know the full story. So I wanted to take time today to tell that story so it's not forever forgotten, but instead we can refer back to this and remember the story. So as mountain biking and recreation really ramped up and became more popular throughout the United States, it certainly was gaining traction here in Pisgah National Forest, which is the birthplace of the National Forest, the cradle of forestry, and the first forestry school in America was just up the road from where I'm standing right now. But there were lots and lots and lots of leftover timber extraction routes, logging roads, skidder trails, everything in between, because this area had been, logged very, very heavily at the turn of the early 1900s. Basically, everything had been clear cut and into mills and floated down the river. But that left this infrastructure of roads, and at some point in time the Forest Service said, hey, let's do road to trail conversions, which really was nothing more than an exercise of the computer and a mouse, and we take them out of road inventory and we put them into trail inventory. And I would guesstimate that upwards of 75% of all trails in the Pisgah area, Pisgah National Forest area, really started their lives as roads, timber extraction routes. It's really, really high. We did an 8-mile hike yesterday, and pretty much everything we were on was old roadbed. And this you clearly can see just by the width, and then also the back slope. You can see, that this was in fact an old roadbed. So.
Trying to warn me about a bear or anything.
No bears. So these old timber extraction routes were steep. The concept of sustainability was certainly not a thought process. It was all about getting in, getting the timber out in the most efficient way, and getting it down to market. And what they left behind, they didn't really care. But as recreation really ramped up, the fallacy of these old road beds as trails really started to, show itself as they really started to erode with increased use. A lot of these gradients are just very, very, very steep. As you can see, many of them are located really close to water. Here in Pisgah, you don't have to go very far at all, and you'll find some form of hydrology, streams, creeks, rivers, the whole 9 yards. So this trail had been worked on by a previous trail contractor that had come in and just put in big rolling grade dips, no real armoring, one minor bridge that was really way too short and too not really undergunned. As I was getting ready to move to Bend, Oregon for good, I wanted to leave one more last legacy project here in Pisgah, and did the same thing over in DuPont. I had worked extensively in both for 20 plus years, and I wanted to leave one more. So approached the Forest Service about doing a formal road to trail conversion, which is basically putting the trail in the old road prism where it's best for drainage, where it's best for sight lines, so that we can reduce user conflict, and just make it feel a lot less like a road. So left to right instead of just a very linear straight, single track located on the old roadbed. The Forest Service liked the idea. We came out and looked at it. I had looked at it a lot beforehand, and certainly had looked at it in the rain. I'd walked this corridor many times in the rain. We're coming up on a creek crossing, which is of particular interest. All the rock armoring that you see up above, none of that was there, and this was eroding very, very badly. So badly, in fact, that this creek had been completely choked with sediment load, you could not see the creek where I'm standing right now. The creek had disappeared and had been forced underground because of the sediment load that had come from up above and had settled in this location. It had been completely forced underground. So we proposed the road to trail conversion. We proposed cleaning this creek out to get the river flowing again, which is much better for the aquatic species. Lots of T&E species here in Pisgah. Many of them live in the water or are in and out of the water. Building a significant bridge, which you see here. Lots and lots of rock armoring work to keep these sections from further eroding by elevating the user and putting the user on a hardened surface. Therefore, they're not displacing soil, which is going to be, taken away in the next rainstorm. We call this the Big Dig project. It was approximately 2 weeks worth of work. I'll have to look back in my old photos. But myself and Shrimper, another trail contractor, were here during the week often. We would have a few people come out, but on weekends we would have 50 plus, maybe 75 people come out and do finish work behind the machine work, and then also helping us build these significant bridges, which, just getting the materials in to start with was a pretty significant effort. The stringers on these bridges are 20 plus feet long, and they're 4x12s, if I remember correctly. And I have to peek underneath to remind myself, but all of this material had to be brought in. The deck boards we could bring in via machine. The stringers, we just had to hump it in using lots of humans. And I've got photos of that. So beautiful bridge. The creek has run clear ever since. I've been out here a number of times because I come back to the area about once a year, and I've been out here in the rain, and I'm happy to report that every time I've been here, this creek has been running clear. So no sediment load. As you can see, lots and lots of rock armoring. Some of this was harvested on site. Some of this was brought in, what we call imported. And again, that all had to be hauled in via tracked carrier types of machines. Good drain here that goes into a nice settling basin here to prevent that sediment load from popping into the creek. More rock armoring. So this project involved machines, building drains, lots of drains, lots of rock armor work. And there's another significant bridge down below the one that we just looked at. So big carpentry skills. This was an old historic logging bridge here that I think collapsed in the last big hurricane storm. Has been since replaced with locust, but dirt on top to sort of mimic the old, and you'll see some of the old wood down here. But again, road to trail conversions, we try to give it more meander, push it to the outside edge sometimes, push it to the inside edge, always thinking about sight lines. They've done a tremendous amount of work cutting the corridor, cutting it back, opening up and providing for much better sight lines. So hats off to Pisgah Sorba. Thank you for your continuing efforts to protect the hard work that so many of us put into building this into a very challenging, challenged alignment, but it certainly is stable, and it definitely helped. As you can see, there's not a lot of other places that we could put this trail, and because of so much T&E species and the NEPA work required, more often than not here in Pisgah, we prefer to keep the trails in their current alignment. But a lot of previous efforts and more traditional, if you will, techniques had failed, and the road to trail conversion process is something that we had really developed and, really perfected over in DuPont State Forest, and bringing that to this location certainly has made a really big difference. One of the constructs of this work was we wanted to keep it, in a Pisgah flavor, if you will. We want it to be technical in nature. We left any rock that was there, as you can see. And then we brought in lots of rock. We built in some drop-offs. And if anything, it's more technical but more stable than it ever was before. One thing they've done since I left is adding these core logs in the drains that are very, very close to the creek. And the idea is to prevent any additional sediment from dropping into the creek. So it hits the core log. Core log is coconut fiber with burlap, so it's porous. Water can poke right through it. But you can see almost a brown spot right there. And that's telling me that this concept is working really well. So I like that. They're not in every drain. They're only in the drains that are very, very close to water. So here's another one here. We first used core log over on a project at about the same time as this one, maybe a little bit earlier, to stabilize the slope. So it's interesting to see it being used in other ways, and in really good ways. Protecting water quality here is of utmost importance, again, because of so many teeny species. But yeah, the idea was just drains every 50 feet, because the gradient of this was so steep. It's super pushy for a bike, which means that it's also super pushy for water. So good big drains that would last a very long time, obviously all machine cut. But as I walk it today, I would argue that few users would really recognize that machines had been here. So yeah, the Lower Black Mountain Trail, it was a super fun project. Thank you to everybody that came out and worked with us during this period of time. Thank you, Pisgah Area Sorba, for continuing the ongoing maintenance and stewardship on this super important trail. I'm really happy at how the product turned out some 10 years ago. I've been on it a number of times since then, and I'm real happy to see that what we did worked. And I'm real happy to see that there's ongoing effort. These kinds of trail projects not only build good trail, but just as important, they build community. And that really is so important. Thanks for listening.